Thanks.
In terms of what we're talking about, if you have a copy of the draft rules, it's actually number 8 under section, I guess it's under section 2609. And what it's referred to as geographic limitation, because when Act 166 was passed, the intention was that families could go to any pre-qualified program in the state. That doesn't include New York programs or New Hampshire programs or Massachusetts programs, because that's another question I've gotten many times.
That's a no.
Within the state, as a no.
That's a
It
no.
has to be within the state. Oh, within the state. And there were some concerns that were raised in the legislature about whether that was going to be a benefit to everyone. And so there were some concerns around whether there needed to be some way for there to be some limits as to which pre-qualified programs a family could actually access depending on where they lived. So the legislature put in a provision within the law that states that the agencies, charge the agencies with working on developing criteria and a process for the what we call more easily pre-K regions. So these pre-K regions, and that the first thing we needed to do was to come up with a plan and submit it to them by January 15th, which is next week, which we will meet that deadline with our suggested criteria and process for determining. So in terms of pre-K regions, it's an application process that school districts that want to develop or identify a pre-K region so that they only need to partner with those pre-qualified programs within that region. They will need to submit an application form that, according to our draft rules, and also we're moving this forward too in our report to the legislature, will be to make sure that we have the programs, including we will be the agencies of education and human services in consultation with a host of the folks are coming up with a process. They'll be working with the school board that's requesting it, private pre-qualified providers, parents and guardians of pre-K kids, and interested parties in order to determine what would be a decision of yay or nay to the proposed preschool region. There are some pre-K regions. There are some limits in terms of what it has to include. It can be no smaller than a school district, and preferably it would be larger than that school district. But it does talk about being it can be no smaller than that. So families would be able to use those pre-qualified providers within that region. Initially, when this was passed, I heard from a lot of school districts that said, oh yes, we're going to rush out and establish one. I have since heard a lot of folks pushing back from that and feeling as though they would not be setting up a pre-K region, or if they are, they're thinking very broadly, like, for example, an entire SU, for example. So that is a bit of a difference when this was first put forth and what I have heard recently. What it requires is in the application, they have to clearly identify a proposed pre-K regions. They have to present a rationale for why they're making the request. And then they have to include a report of the dates and summaries of public school board discussions, including a notice about that. They also need to make sure that they involve all of those individuals that are going to be impacted, including pre-qualified providers within and outside and neighboring towns of the proposed region, as well as families of children that would be impacted by this. And then that will be coming to the agencies. The agencies will have a time certain to review all of the information and make a decision. There will be an opportunity, if it's not a clear-cut decision. There'll be an opportunity for the agencies to gather more information from the folks within the proposed pre-K region and neighboring towns outside of that region in order to make a well-founded decision. So that is where we are in terms of coming up with that. It will be part of our part 2 of the guidance that we will be coming out with more details. We felt we had quite a bit of discussion done on that, but we wanted to make sure that we got approval from the legislature before we put anything out on guidance. It is fairly well specified in terms of the draft rules, but again, we didn't want to circumvent the legislative process and the requirement to have this report to them by the 15th. So the next guidance, which hopefully won't be taking as long as this first guidance did to get to you, hopefully within a month or so, we will have one of the items will be the pre-K regions with more information about what that will look like. And that also has an application process as well.
So just to let you know, the legislation actually required participation of a number of stakeholders in this process. So what we're working with is Allie Richards convened a meeting. We've met 2 or 3 times with a variety of stakeholders to talk about this criteria. Some of the stuff that's emerged is that because the bill is about access and because our major concerns around access, the justification has to be based on access, not on budget. And so that has been that's sort of a driving background to that, which I think is an important thing to say. And it also speaks again to the reason why the delay in implementation sort of mattered. When we were starting to talk about this and everybody was making decisions and we still hadn't even gotten approval from the legislature on the criteria on the regions, which they required in the bill, it just wasn't making as much sense. Though, as Manuela said, I think there was a lot of early interest in regions for a lot of reasons. Budget concerns, special education concerns. Right. Special education directors are very concerned about trying to serve kids, and we all know that there's a lot of tension around that. We are really hoping as agencies that this gives us an opportunity to talk about the current challenges we have with serving kids in community settings, and as well as any new challenges that come up. And so we think this is an opportunity to address those issues, not necessarily a time that's going to exacerbate that. So a lot of that was happening, but it depends on the behavior of Vermont families. And I remember this conversation in the legislature. I heard the legislators who were concerned, and honestly, a couple of them were really concerned about their local private providers saying, well, hey, if all the people in our town go running up to where they work, our little local preschool that's private is going to close down because they can't. I mean, it wasn't just public schools. This was really a concern about private providers as well. And it really became a question about it impacted the access issue. So that was the driving reason around. If you have parents in a town who can't leave it and there's nothing in that town, they don't have access. So that was really the driving force, and it will be partly how we make these decisions as we move forward. I frankly, many of you guys know way better than me because I'm still a newbie after 6 years. Probably after 6 generations, I'm a newbie, I think. But I don't think there's going to be a big flight of Vermont families from their local communities. I just don't think that's how Vermonters behave. So I think that, again, the delayed implementation will help us to look at that and understand that most parents are making the choices that they make now based on a lot of personal priorities and preferences. And I think they're going to continue to make those same decisions. This will just hopefully make life easier for them. So it'll be interesting watching how the implementation plays out. But as Manuela said, hopefully this will, again, do what we intended it to do and just shore up the access issue and become a sort of something we work on together, wanting to ensure access.
Maureen? Will there be an appeal process in that?
Yes.
For parents that, because in Chittenden County we have so many other districts.
There's an exception process actually where even if, the other thing I was going to mention is it's the school board that has to make the application, which is interesting all by itself. And so there has to be some public process at school board meetings to have this conversation. But then if a parent, there is a process whereby a parent who says, look, for me, this is just impossible. That there's not hours I can do here. So that there is an opportunity for them to get exceptions. Not even an appeal, just an exception.
To the school board for an exception. And there is an appeal process for everything.
Or group, I forget what we
there
call
is.
it. Is it an appeal process?
It's
or
an administrative
it has a different name.
action or
An
something of that
administrative
nature.
something.
Yeah,
or other.
an
It's got a legal name that I don't think is appeal. It's in there. It's in the law.
Yeah,
It's in the law and it's in the rules, so it can't go away.
Administrative complaint procedures.
That's it. Thank you.
So
I knew
it
we
is
didn't use any
going
words that were
to.
familiar to me.
So there are a lot of things that, and this is just part of how we operate. People do have rights to say that I felt I was slighted by this, or that the rule wasn't followed appropriately, or things of that nature. So there is, but prior to that, before we get there, there
Right.
is opportunity, and actually needs to be opportunity, for folks to weigh in before a school board can apply for the pre-K region. So there needs to be that conversation again.
And even in the administrative complaint process, I mean, one of the things I kind of like is that it doesn't have to come up to us. If a parent can go to their school board, can go to their school district and say, can you give me an exception to this because this is my particular hardship, and they can grant it to them before they even pick up the phone and call us, which
definitely.
we think is a more reasonable process for families and schools who everybody's trying to do the right thing here. There's a lot of philosophic agreement on this as a good thing. It's just the devil's in the details a lot of the times.
And
Sure.
you just clarified it for me. So they first would go to the school board, and if they felt they weren't treated in the spirit of the law, they could then appeal to the agency.
And that's actually in the law and in the rules, that they can ask for an exception even before they get to the appeal process.
The bottom line, Manuel, you're saying not many districts look like they're doing these regional.
Well, it varies, and I don't hear from everybody. I mean, we have 62 districts, 62 supervisory unions and supervisory
boards?
districts. And then if you bring it down to the school districts, so like, Burlington is its own school district, but Middlebury is within the SU. So if I think in school boards, what do we have? Is it 250?
So there's 250 opportunities to create a pre-K region.
So those are the local decisions. What one of the takeaways I'm hoping that everyone gets is that one of the takeaways is that you really need to be involved in your school board, know what's happening in those meetings. These are where the decisions are going to be made. And so you need to at least look at the agenda, which they have to post ahead of time, and see, is this something that I need to be at in order to make sure that my voice is heard?
And
So it's incumbent upon all of you around the table to be your own advocates as well in those situations.
And it's a great opportunity for education about the work that you do and the importance of early childhood. It's another opportunity in your community, because it really is, in communities where support will happen, and that's important.
Manuela, this is Cynthia.
No.
Can I ask the question, so it sounds like it's a case-by-case basis, though, as to
terms
whether
of the
or not
decision.
and also in terms of the appeals process, which is not an appeal, but I've already forgotten the lengthy name for it.
Administrative complaint process.
That piece.
Got
It
it
sounds
now.
like a case-by-case basis. If that's true, is there any, if a particular region that's been identified has a number of individual cases brought up against it, is there anything that will then trigger that district having to go back and reopen that conversation?
I think
That
we'll
might
want
indicate.
to know about those, but again, it wouldn't be, probably the first thing would be a request to make an exception to
Right.
the pre-K region.
Right.
And we would want to track those and ask the school districts to track those so that we have that information as well. There is also a provision in the law and also in the rules which talks about if we find that there isn't enough capacity within a pre-K region that, and statewide as well, that we will be working with the Building Bright Futures state and regional councils, specifically the regional councils, to work on coming up with some solutions to increase capacity. So that's the other part of it. But I do think we need to track these things very well. Right now, we don't have a good tracking system about, for example, how many kids want to participate in pre-K but don't have an opportunity to do so because they can't get into a program that is in partnership currently. Because I know in some programs there's a waiting list that it's good if you plan, before the kid is even conceived to get into the program. So I hope you've planned ahead. But anyway, so I do know that that's the case, but we haven't kept good data on that. So we're now in a position of we have some anecdotal data, but not really good solid data. Anecdotally, we don't see that there are a lot of kids who want to participate in pre-K who are not able to do so, anecdotally. But we don't have the hard data. And some of you may be thinking, well, that's not my case, and you probably know better than I do. But from what we're hearing, this is what I'm seeing.
And so that's, again, part of the sort of game-changing impact of this law is that the process is that a family has to enroll their child in the public school system just like they do when they're in kindergarten or first grade. Now we know this kid. If they've already chosen a pre-qualified provider, that information could come, or maybe they just enroll looking for a program, then they can go search for programs if they want a private program or see what's available. We will now know the number of kids who have enrolled in their public school and don't have a place to go. We will have some data about this. So it's really, and the schools will know that, and so that it will be, much clearer if that is happening. And then it's on all of us. The goal is that the regional councils are sort of the convener of the conversation, but the conversation includes the school system, the families, the private providers who are saying together, how do we make sure that all of the kids who want this can have it?
Right. And we do anticipate that eventually we will see quite an increase because we do know that there are many school districts currently that only serve children the year prior to kindergarten. So just the 4-year-olds or those who have turned 5 after the cutoff point, the kindergarten cutoff point. So for those districts, we know we're going to see quite a lot of an increase because of the need is going to be increased tremendously because the 3-year-olds will now also be entitled to kindergarten, whereas before school districts had a choice. For some of you, communities have decided to serve 3s and 4s. But in number of communities and school districts, they only serve 4s. So we're going to see that a tremendous jump in terms of the need for more places.
And again, we should be very proud as Vermonters. I think we're maybe one of 3 and 4 states in the nation. Maybe we're the only one who serves 3s and 4s universally.
Yeah,
so this is like really a big deal. Yeah. And I know that the implementation and I know that change is hard. But that this passed and that we're doing it is a really big deal. So let's be patient with each other and really make this happen because it's big.
Sherry?
Yeah, I just, if a region is designated for a school district, is that forever or is there a renewal period where they provide?
That's a good question.
If we're finding that they're not able to, they could decide to.
They can decide to.
Yeah, and if we're finding that there are a lot of people that are not getting what they need, that there isn't the capacity or there isn't enough choice, then we could also intervene as well and have a
I think it'll probably be somewhat of a
discussions.
negotiation.
Yeah. So I'm looking at your questions under the 11 o'clock, and I have no idea what time it is, by the way.
We're on target.
Oh, okay. I'm
We're
looking at those
11:15.
questions, and I think that we've answered them. I do think that it's the process. We're still finalizing that because we do need to ask, basically, run it by the House and Senate Ed committees and get their approval before we can put that more in stone. And then also, so we can tell you what we have in draft rules. You can read that yourself. It will be in guidance after the 15th when we have that much more settled.
Probably a little like we have to submit a report the 15th. I shouldn't say this on tape. When they read the report, they get it the 15th and they read it, and then they call us and say, "Come talk to us." We don't know when they're going to say, "Come talk to us." So we may, I don't know, Allie may, advocate for them to do that sooner or later, so that we feel we have a response and a blessing from the committees. But don't forget, some of the committees are newly formed. There's new leadership in the Senate Ed Committee. They got a lot of stuff on their plate right now, but we're going to try to make sure that we get a blessing for them on the report. It will not happen the 15th. It will happen when they get to it, which hopefully will be soon. We'll draft guidance. This is what happens. We'll draft guidance based on that, change it if we have to, and get it to you as soon as we're sure it's confirmed. And that'll be sort of the next set of interim guidance and another set of FAQs. And so we do encourage people that as there are questions, we try to record everything. Manuel gets tons of stuff. We try to keep a record of it. We draft the answers together, and there will be new iterations of frequently asked questions that we'll just keep adding to what we have. It was set up with intention that we've got FAQs 1, there'll be a new date in FAQs 2, where there's the new questions that sometimes it's that we need legal opinions on it, sometimes it's that we don't know yet, sometimes it's that we have to talk to a lot of people about it before we answer, but then we'll keep just rolling the answers out so that everybody gets the answers that are the same at the same time.
In terms of the second question, which is how can folks get involved in the discussion of regional determinations, as I said, that needs to start off at your school board. So that's the first part before the application gets completed. And then also afterwards, if there are questions or concerns, as it's being deliberated by the agencies, that's also another part to get involved. And if we will be open to hearing from everyone. How to ensure transparent discourse? Well, as I said, basically the information, there has to be a public meeting to talk about this. You need to make sure that you know when that public meeting is happening, if it is happening. As I said, not all school districts are thinking about doing this. So you need to be there in order to do it, but it's required that it be an open discussion.
So pay attention.
Maureen?
This is related. Will the EEI grants still be available?
It's a hard one to answer. We had to cut essentially 10% from our budget and our general funds budget, and so we're not sure that we can maintain the money for the EEI grants. It really will depend in terms of what the governor's office, the administration, has about this budget cut. Just hearing VPR this morning, it doesn't look like anything's getting any better with the general fund, so I wouldn't be very optimistic.
It's a hard year.
Any other questions about this part? All right.